Thank you all for such a great turnout this morning for our first men's club brunch of the season. And thank you to the members of the men's club, and especially to Luis, for the men's club president, for putting this on and organizing this, and a number of exciting speakers to come through the year. I'm Bill Hockheiser. I know some of you, I don't know all of you, and for those who don't know me, I'm one of the co-presidents of the congregation. Robert Lewis is my co-president. He couldn't be here today. And I want to introduce our speaker for this morning, who's Mikey Weinstein. Just a little background. Mikey is a 1977 graduate of the U.S. Air Force Academy, and that he continued a long tradition in his family, 3 generations of military graduates, military academy graduates, who served in every major combat engagement that we've had since World War I. He has been married for over 35 years to his wife Bonnie, proud father of 2 sons and 1 daughter, and his oldest son and daughter-in-law are 2004 graduates, and Mike's youngest son graduated the class of 2007 from the Air Force Academy, and his son-in-law 2010 from the Air Force Academy. So that's a pretty good family tradition being carried on. Mikey is a registered Republican, and he spent over 3 years in the West Wing of the White House in the Reagan administration as legal counsel. And then after stints in prominent law firms in New York City and Washington, D.C., he served as first general counsel to Ross Perot. Remember his presidential campaigns. And he left Mr. Perot's employ in 2006 and founded the nonprofit charitable foundation, Military Religious Freedom Foundation, that battles the far-right militant evangelical fundamentalists in the military. But Mikey has appeared on TV many times, in print media many times, in all the prominent newspapers across the country. And then in October 2006, St. Martin's Press released a book, With God on Our Side, One Man's War Against an Evangelical Coup in America's Military. And in January 2012, his latest book is No Snowflake in an Avalanche, the Military Religious Freedom Foundation, its battle to defend the Constitution and one family's courageous war against religious extremism in high places. So and that details his foundation's prominent cases. Mikey's been named one of the 50 most influential Jews in America, and he has a long list of awards that you can read in the shofar, and appearances on TV, in print publications, and an award from various foundations and nonprofit organizations. So with that, we'll just invite Mikey up and get started with this talk. So.
Well, thank you very much. Can you guys hear me okay?
No.
Can? No?
That's good.
Okay. I really don't need this, but I'll use this if you guys can hear it okay. Is that any better?
Yes.
Yes.
It's a pleasure to be here today. I guess you're kicking off the Men's Club speaker series, which is nice to be able to be here for, and it's good to be back here again. What I'll do very briefly is tell you a little bit about our foundation, kind of what we do, and then I'll open up for some questions and answers. Hopefully I'll provide the answers, you'll have the questions. If you want it the other way around, I'd be happy to ask you guys questions too. So, as your co-president just said, we founded, my wife and I founded the foundation in December of 2005 to basically fight what has turned out to be the Christian version of the Taliban, where all the nuclear weapons are, and where all the drones are conventional laser-guided weapons in the U.S. military. When we started out, we never thought we'd end up as we are today with 34,367 clients that we currently have. We get hundreds more each month. These are United States Marines, sailors, soldiers, airmen, cadets, midshipmen, at the three major military academies, Annapolis, where my father graduated from, the Air Force Academy, where I graduated from, my brother-in-law, my brother actually went there, and my two sons, daughter-in-law, and son-in-law, as well as at West Point. Flying to West Point a week from today to go meet with the new commanding general, the superintendent there. We have 177 clients there. We have clients at every military installation in the world. About 1,000 of them scattered across the globe in 150 countries. Interestingly enough, about 96% of our clients are practicing Christians. About 3/4 are Protestants of every denomination, you can imagine. The other 1/4 are Roman Catholic. Why are they our clients? Because they're being persecuted for not being Christian enough. It's as simple as that. The other 4% are Jewish. We have over 400 Jewish clients. We represent just a little over 13% of all Muslim Americans in the U.S. military. We have 801 LGBT clients. And we even have 12 clients that belong to the Jedi faith. We don't ask. We got it for them on their dog tags. I think it's very much like Baha'i. It's very chill. It's Star Wars-esque, and the last time I checked the Constitution, it didn't say that you had to have an enumerated faith or any faith, but that's what they do, and that's what we help them with. Our website, if any of you use the computer, is very simple. It's just militaryreligiousfreedom.org. The one thing the gentleman forgot to mention that we're kind of proud of is, and we never expected it, but we have 5 Nobel Peace Prize nominations now in the last 4 years, including one for this year. It's given out each year in October in Oslo, and they're hard to get. This is the heaviest nomination year ever for the Nobel Peace Prize, and there's only 259 nominees worldwide, and only 50 of them are organizations. The last 2 years, we've been nominated by prior winners of the Nobel Peace Prize. This isn't narcissism, it's necessity. Unfortunately, what we do is extraordinarily controversial. You may notice some people in the room here that may not look like they're members of the synagogue, but they're members of our MRFF family, I can assure you. It's clear, I have an op-ed coming out in the media tomorrow, which is entitled, if I remember because I finished it late last night, "No Pleasure Ride on a Unicorn, the Case for Uncivil Civil Rights Activism." I can assure you that what I do and we have nearly 150 people in this foundation now across the country, many of them are full-time volunteers, is not like riding a unicorn through a cotton candy forest, handing out lollipops to little forest animals that are singing in English in unison. It really is blood sport. There is no trapeze net under civil rights activism, particularly the way that we do it. We are very militant and aggressive. You need to understand the people that we're fighting. On Father's Day 2008, a movie that we have appeared in, which was an Oscar nominee, Oren Jacobi's Constantine's Sword, premiered nationally. We went to the premiere in Santa Fe. The movie is a New York Times Critics Pick, very high ratings on Rotten Tomatoes. We came home that evening, and that evening we had our house attacked. We had people on the roof. Some of you may remember it was in the media. The dogs had alerted, but at the time, with swamp coolers and it's nighttime, you can't always hear things. And people backed out of our driveway very quickly, about 30 seconds after we got the dogs out there, knocking over some of our lights. And my daughter and I were in the house. She turned around first, and I heard this scream, and there was a large swastika and a crucifix next to the door that they had painted on there. Interesting juxtaposition of the cross and the swastika. As I remember, we heard from so many people. At that time, Mayor Chavez sent his graffiti team out. My 80-year-old mother-in-law, who I think was 78 at the time, who's a devout Christian, went to Target and bought a bunch of cleanser. I think she was out there trying to scrub it off the next day for about 8 hours. It just accentuated it, unfortunately, because it was on Adobe. Marty Chavez sent out his famous graffiti removal team, even though technically we live east of Tramway, and they blew it off the front of the house. But that was a turning point for us. It's when we really began to realize that the threats that were being made against us and against what we're doing, it showed that we were having a significant effect. I remember that we heard from so many different houses of worship in this town, with the exception of those, I won't name them, that would be considered fundamentalist Christian houses of worship. So you understand who we're fighting. I'll put you through about a 2-minute tutorial, maybe 90 seconds, I'll make it very quickly. If you can imagine a circle, and this circle is Christendom, Christianity, because as I mentioned, most of our staff, some of who are here today, Andy Casehagen, one of our senior people, most of our staff, 75% I think, Andy, are Christians. 96% of our clients are Christians. Most of our donors are Christians. Our largest growth area among our clients that come to us are evangelical Christians. They are on our advisory board. They donate to us. They support us. So why are we so controversial? Why the threats? Why the bodyguards? Why all the weapons? Why the protection from canines that we need? Look at this circle. This is Christianity. If I draw a north-south line in the middle of this circle, on the left side of this line over here is where progressive mainline Protestants and Roman Catholics live. To use Star Trek parlance, their prime directive is called the Great Commandment, something that Jesus talks about in the book of Matthew specifically with his famous Sermon on the Mount, which is just basically two things that mainline Protestants and mainline Roman Catholics follow. Love the Lord your God with all your mind, soul, and heart. Sound familiar to us who are Jews? And secondly, basically the Golden Rule, which of course pre-existed in the Hebrew Scriptures, the Pentateuch, and before we even had the Torah, pre-existed in the Code of Hammurabi. The Great Commandment, just those two things. That's it. When you cross this line and go to this side of the circle, this is where evangelical and fundamentalist Christians live. Now, when you heard the introduction, my first book when it came out the subtitle was One Man's War Against an Evangelical Coup in America's Military. I wish I could take that back. I made a mistake. I thought we were fighting evangelicals and fundamentalists. I didn't understand that there's a second north-south line on this half of the circle. On this side of that line, but still to the right of that main line, that's where evangelicals live. And on this crescent, the last part of the circle, is where something you've probably never heard of exists. They are called Dominion or Dominionist Christians. Synonymous with this are fundamentalist Christians. You can think of Pat Robertson, whom I loathe. Jerry Falwell, who is the first one I think that referred to me as the field general of the godless armies of Satan. When he died of a heart attack, I was asked for comment by the press, and I indicated I was very happy. Ding dong, the witch is dead. Remember, you come to the wrong person to say, I'm sure he was a nice guy in some way. My mother might say that, but I'm not going to do that. The difference here is that every fundamentalist, or its synonym, ladies and gentlemen, of B'nai Israel, Dominionism, is an evangelical. But not the other way around. Not every evangelical is a fundamentalist. Why this second line here? Well, both on this side of the circle, their prime directive is not the Great Commandment. It's something called the Great Commission. In Mark 16:15 and Matthew 28:19, one of the last things Jesus is supposed to have said to his disciples, go and make disciples of all nations. It's a commandment. Get out there and get them into the kingdom. It's an order. So on this half of the circle, both evangelicals and fundamentalists do that. The big difference is evangelicals are saying, look, yes, we want to convert everybody at B'nai Israel to become Christians like us, but we live in America. So therefore we have to comport our zeal, and that's what it is, to proselytize in accordance with the time, place, and manner restrictions that are put forth by our social contract in this country, the U.S. Constitution, its construing federal and state case law, as well as Department of Defense and the military, directives, instructions, and regulations. We have to follow the law. And now, when you cross that second line and get to this crescent here, that is where the fundamentalists or dominionists live. Their response to that is, I could make a hand signal, but I want to be relatively politic. Oh, hell with it. That is their response to, there is no time, there is no place, There is no manner in which we can be restricted in pushing forth our weaponized gospel of Jesus Christ. You see, you're going to burn eternally in the fires of hell. You idiots, don't you understand how simple this is? That's the difference. The people we're fighting do not believe. They believe they can scream Jesus in a crowded theater. Now, I happen to love baseball. I've been evangelized at Isotopes games. I love that. I love what they do. I love when they come to my door. If I was walking through the mall or walking on, hiking up in the mountains, that's great. That's the place to do it. That's the free marketplace of ideas. But when your military superior even gently approaches you to evangelize you, get the hell out of my face, sir or ma'am, is not an option for you. So they come to me. Questions coming later. I'll remember you. Pink-shirted man. It is not an option for you. If you try to stand up for yourself in today's U.S. military, if you're even being gently evangelized, you turn yourself into what we call a tarantula on a wedding cake. My daughter was married about 15 months ago, and I can assure you at Disney World, where the wedding happened, had a tarantula been on that wedding cake, it would not have lasted very long. 12 of our clients have KIA'd, killed in action downrange in Iraq and Afghanistan. The worst blow we had was the attack on Benghazi, when one of the 2 Navy SEALs killed, a very dear friend and a longtime member of our advisory board, Glenn Doherty. Glenn was the one of the Navy SEALs killed there. He handled so much of our stuff for us, particularly with the Marine Corps. He's not been easily replaced. We have a lot of people that support us now. When we first started, it was just my wife and myself, and we had 4 or 5 clients at the Air Force Academy. All of them, I think, were Jewish. Gary Johnson just joined our advisory board a few months ago. Perhaps you remember the outed CIA agent Valerie Plame, her husband Joe Wilson. They're like family. Joe's on my board. Mike Farrell from the TV show MASH is a great supporter. Dick Lamb, the former 3-term governor in Colorado. We have the former vice chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff on our board. Ed Asner is a huge supporter, not technically on the board, but might as well be. A few months ago, we added Colin Powell, Chief of Staff, and he was Secretary of State. Larry Wilkerson, Army Colonel, highly decorated from Vietnam. We have a lot of wonderful veterans who've seen a lot of combat that support us. Most of our clients, as I said before, are terrified to come forward to talk about anything that they're experiencing. You see the sexual assault issues in the military. Everybody's against rape, but when you try to tell them that you can't theologically rape somebody, they get very upset. The American Family Association, Focus on the Family, the Family Research Council. If you see the word family, it's bad. It's really bad. These are people that have tried to turn me into a bête noire, the black beast, because they're raising a lot of money off of us. Because the latest thing happened on April 23rd. Myself, Larry Wilkerson, and Ambassador Joe Wilson had a meeting at the Pentagon, which we asked for and they granted, to explain on behalf of our clients how we were happy the Air Force had passed a new regulation that criminalizes proselytizing. But if you have a law that is complied with more in its breach than in its conformance, it's worse than if you never had the law before. And so we had the meeting. The Washington Post covered it both before and after, right before and right after, and this ignited absolute fury in the religious right. We kind of sat back with a smile on our face because, we've seen all this before. When white people felt threatened because of people of color getting their civil rights, white privilege gives way to white victimization. You see, Rosa Parks was really victimizing white people because now they can't sit in the front of the bus anymore. Up is down, down is up, black is white, white is black. Rainy day is sunny day is rainy day. This is civil rights activism. When feminism came to the fore, male privilege gave way to male victimization. When it involves sexual preference, straight privilege and straight victimization. But now we're dealing with Christianity, but just that sliver of it, since most of our clients are believers in Jesus Christ as well. They just won't go to that point where they'll violate the law to do it. Being called in the press, as I often am, a commie, leftist, demon, satanic atheist. And I tell people that I'm not, you say atheist like it's a bad thing. To begin with, I'm not an atheist. I'm a jagnostic, a Jewish agnostic. I still pray 3 times a day in Hebrew. Not totally sure that anybody's out there listening, but I'm just the messenger. I don't care if I wanted to become one of those folks that was going to follow the Jedi faith. We're not going to stop doing what we're doing. It's easy to, when you tell somebody that they lack integrity or character, intelligence, honor, honorability, trustworthiness, and courage because of their chosen religious faith, you see. There's no difference between that and telling someone that they're stupid because of the color of their skin or because they were born a woman. For the hell of it, I Googled the name of our foundation before I came down here, and in 0.17 of a second, I think we had 18 million hits. And I thought about that. That's amazing because we started this from nothing. I started off as a pissed off parent because my two sons were being called effing Jews and being accused of total complicity in the execution of Jesus Christ at the U.S. Air Force Academy by numerous officers and cadets. One of our security folks mentioned something to me just this morning, that you can't fight a bonfire with a glass of water. We are often criticized, as I said, for being extremely aggressive and abrasive. And my response is, welcome to the fight. I would say we probably average between 8 to 12 significantly grotesque death threats a week on a quiet week. And I'm not talking about, playing the violin, oh, poor pitiful us. Not at all. I'm just letting you know what it is. Remember, not narcissism, necessity. We are not commerce. We are cause. I'm paying for the right to be here today. I waived the speaker's fee we charge. I'll be in Tulsa in a month, and I've waived all that. But the gents here don't work for, so I came here and I'm paying for the right to talk to you all today because I thought it was that important. And it's not just someone to talk to after you eat the bagel and lox. My charge to you is to get on our website, see what we're doing, and get involved. It's not that I don't care about the HIV crisis in sub-Saharan Africa, or global warming. I do. But you all need to understand that the people we're fighting want to use our nuclear weapons as an accelerant and lubricant to bring their version, again, of weaponized Jesus back. In a dominionist congregation, and there are many of them around the country, they will often throw their hands to the ceiling on a Sunday. And they'll be reminded that their version of Jesus has promised them a 200-mile-long river. Think about the Rio Grande. 4.5 feet deep, filled with nothing but the human blood of those that their version of Jesus has slaughtered at the Battle of Armageddon. But I'm not done. Then they'll sit there and say, therefore, my Christian brothers and sisters, rejoice, rejoice! For the worst is yet to come. And they love that stuff. And I don't care what their views are, but when you become an alloy with the technologically most lethal organization ever created by humankind, our Department of Defense, it is not Houston we have a problem. It is not Houston we have an issue or a challenge. What we have is a metastasizing national security threat to our country, every bit as much as what we're facing externally by a resurgent Taliban and Al-Qaeda in width, breadth, and magnitude. Except that it's almost impossible to believe that it's existing unless you are complicit. Our bona fides speak for themselves. I'm very proud when our foundation gets recognized. Andy led a crusade, although I shouldn't say that word, for the last few years to get us accepted on the Combined Federal Campaign. Anybody know what that is out there, the CFC? Okay, that was a pretty big thing for us, because we are viewed as being on the, how many people out there have ever had or currently has a cat or a dog? Show of hands? I know that Aunt Tom will not raise her hand. If you care about animals, on one end of the spectrum for animal rights, you've got the Humane Society. They're wonderful, they're sweet, they do cookie bake-offs and they do adoptions, and they're wonderful. I love the Humane Society. But on the far end of the spectrum, you have PETA. We are PETA. And if we're the Godzilla, if they call us Godzillas, we're the Godzilla that they turned us into. Because there is a time when you have to fight fire with fire. And the result of that is that you piss a lot of people off, which is fine. We've had to conform our life to that. Sit in a restaurant a certain way, you drive home to your house in different ways, but it's worth it because otherwise people that do not have a voice cannot fight back. One of the nicest things ever said to us was by a Navajo sailor on a large U.S. aircraft carrier. It's 5 or 6 years ago. He was being mercilessly proselytized by a chief petty officer. And he was from Window Rock. That's as far as I'll go on that. But we solved the issue. I don't know whether they disciplined the CPO or not, because usually the military's not gonna touch religion, but he was transferred, we got a victory in that place. A few days later, we got an email from this particular sailor saying, "Thank you, Mr. Weinstein and MRFF, for being the voice that we are not allowed to speak with." I still get chills when I hear it. It sounds like simple words. But everyone in this room has felt marginalized at some point in your life. Go back there now. Go back now in your mind. I don't care if it was a mistake that you made in high school or grade school or happened an hour before today's event. The feeling of being denigrated, humiliated, hurt for the way you are, your views, is something that you really can't put into words. You must understand, if you've never been in the military, it's hard to understand. If you have been, you fully understand. The military is an incredibly tribal, adversarial, communal, and ritualistic environment. Your military superior is not your shift manager at Taco Bell or Starbucks. It is very different. The military, when you enter the military, many of your constitutional rights are immediately constrained. Did you know that having sexual intercourse with someone other than your spouse in the military, adultery, is routinely punished as a felony? I've tried and defended those cases. I spent 10 years in the JAG world, and I can tell you that there's a reason why adultery is punished as a felony. Because it destroys good order, morale, and discipline. If you're ordered to go to the base dentist at 4 p.m. and you don't go, that's a felony. You give up many of your rights so that we can have the requisite amount of good order and discipline and morale in the military to create the requisite level of lethality for the military to protect the full panoply of the rest of our lives as civilians. I understand not everyone is a civilian in here today, but most of us are. And it's very hard to explain that. You know, I'm not running for office. I tell people, I don't care if you like me or not. We have a large number of law firms that are with us. Our actions speak louder than our words, and our job, the vast majority of cases, will never make it to the media. We're in the major media somewhere every day. I was contacted today, right before the event, by someone, apparently we're in the media in the UK today. Someone reached out to congratulate us and said they had a friend in Albuquerque. I wrote back saying, you know, I'm speaking in an hour and 13 minutes. And they sent an email back saying this person was going to try to make it. I don't know if you're here, you don't have to stand up, but the wonders of the internet. Do a lot of speaking around the country, coast to coast, and I find an incredible amount of ignorance in the average American, docile, supine, ignorant Americans. It's been stated that civilization is a constant race between education and catastrophe, and it's really true. When I talk to audiences and ask them to tell me the difference between an officer and a non-commissioned officer, they don't know. I'll often ask, and this is particularly in colleges, does anyone know the difference between a general and an admiral, or say a private, or or something like that? They don't know. They've heard that we are in a war, in Iraq and Afghanistan. They don't really pay too much attention. But if you ask them who are the judges on The Voice, or how are people doing on American Idol, or Dancing with the Stars, what's the latest happening with Kardashians? And I'm not here trying to bitch about the state of things with regard to, well, yeah, I guess actually I am. Ignorance is going to severely hurt us. And so we face it all the time. I've found that the best way to get somebody's attention is to hurt them. And the people that we are trying to hurt, legally, ethically, and morally, is not just the religious right, as I said, it's the dominionists and the fundamentalists. Many of you probably have not even been aware of that. It's terrifying when you see what they want to do, which is to get rid of our theocracy and turn it into our democracy and turn it into a theocracy. It's pretty terrifying. I often end the speeches with reminding you about the rock star of his day was Benjamin Franklin. When he walked out of the Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia, when we finally had a constitution, he was besieged by Americans saying, Dr. Franklin, what type of government have you bequeathed to us? His response was, a republic, if you can keep it. So what I'm asking you all to do today, visit the website and help us keep the republic. Thank you, Congregation of Israel, very, very much. I'll be happy to Yes, sir. Well, I can't hear you. Why don't you stand up?
I was wondering if, in your own opinion, if the Christianization, so to speak, of the increased a lot under George Bush II administration. Or was it preceded that?
Did you hear the question, anybody? You wanted to know when we felt the so-called Christianization, or I would say the fundamentalist Christianization of the military. Did it really come with George W. Bush? We've traced this latest cycle of it actually back to 1972 with the end of mandatory conscription, the draft. Because prior to a draft, we were pulling people into our military with some degree of cognizable equanimity from both red and blue states. I mean, everybody came in because you're being drafted. Now, I should say we still have a poverty draft. The children of the rich and powerful do not go into the military. They don't. Very, very rarely. So there still is a poverty draft, I assure you. But with after 1972, we saw this morphing where, with the incredible depression that happened, not financial, but psychological, with our national identity with Vietnam, we saw a morphing from people that so-called volunteered from what used to be this equal blue and red state thing, mostly into red states, fusing this hyper patriotism with this version of Christianity that we've talked about. And it continued to grow. Kierkegaard made a great statement that we live our lives forward, but we understand them backwards. When you think about that, it's very true. During my years in the White House, I saw this. But I didn't really, it took hindsight years later for me to see it coming. So it continued to grow and grow and grow. And then in 1994, at the second year of the Clinton presidency, we had the emergence of, who's the guy from Georgia? He was the Speaker of the House. Gingrich, yeah, the Gingrich, so-called Gingrich Revolution, where he came up with the concept that it was like very 1 and 0. If you believed in this, you could be an American. If you didn't, and it was a tremendously divisive thing. It occurred too, during the first midterms when Clinton was in office, and it really spiked. 9 years later, we had 9/11, and it just exploded. It just literally exploded. The people we're fighting, Dominionist Christians, have 4 particular stenches about them. It'd be like walking into an arroyo here in Albuquerque on a hot August day and having your nostrils assaulted by the stench of 10,000 rotting swine. That's how bad it smells. And it's virulent anti-Semitism, virulent misogyny, the belief that women should be consigned to selecting food, preparing food, serving food, cleaning up after meals, getting pregnant, raising children, virulent Islamophobia, virulent homophobia, and the last, which is really the fifth, is this belief that the Constitution is merely flawed man's law, and that needs to be subordinated to this pristine, weaponized gospel of Jesus Christ. Next question. Yes, ma'am.
I take that to mean it was under George Bush II's administration most. The biggest thing.
Yes, but then 9/11. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Could you give an example, a concrete example of how you help these people in such a way that doesn't leave them exposed and more vulnerable after you leave? Exactly what you do.
Sure.
And if the laws are already in place for separation of church and state, is there anything politically that you can and do you work on some effective means to counteract?
Well, I could spend a day on that alone. Let's do the second question first. I hired a lobbyist a few years ago in Washington, very Tony, costs a lot of money lobbyist. She told me after about 8 months to stop paying her because she said, Mikey, no one's going to touch this. They're afraid of losing, right-wing fundamentalist Christian dollars and votes. I believe that under Republicans, man exploits man. But under Democrats, it's just the opposite. We've given up on their political situation. Right now, there are the Congressional Prayer Caucus, which is made up of fundamentalist Christians. It's almost a fourth of the House of Representatives are trying to amend the National Defense Authorization Act, which is the Pentagon funding bill for 2014. I think there are 2 amendments, Andy, aimed at us. This is our crowning glory. One would require the Pentagon to essentially inform Congress 72 hours before anybody in the Pentagon contacted us and give them a report 48 hours after that. We call it the We're Scared of Mikey Weinstein Amendment. The other one would essentially allow free-range proselytizing up and down the ranks. That's the Fleming Amendment, a complete cretin from Louisiana. The other one is the Huelskamp Amendment, some idiot from Kansas, I think it is. Again, I won't be going out to dinner with Congressman Fleming or Huelskamp anytime soon. The Fleming Amendment would allow for free-range proselytizing unless a commander determined it would affect mission criticality, which is just, the Obama administration came out and said in advance that if you put this in the act and have it come to the president, he is going to veto it. So we're about the highest level we've ever been before. Your name is Terry?
Terry.
I wish I could give, I mean, there's so many examples. I'll give you one that startled us the most, which happened just a few days before the anniversary of the Hiroshima and Nagasaki bombings, I think 2 or 3 years ago. We had 68 United States Air Force nuclear missile launch officers. I mean, emphasize nuclear missile launch officers. 62 of them Protestants and Roman Catholics come to us begging for our help to stop the Jesus loves nukes indoctrination. Jesus loves nukes. I said, well, what are you talking about? Vandenberg Air Force Base, where my father was stationed, where I went to high school. I was just out there for my high school reunion last weekend, actually. 40th high school reunion. You know, I'm 58, but I'm told I only look 57 and a half, so pretty happy. We couldn't believe it until one of our supporters via the Freedom of Information Act got a copy of the actual PowerPoint, which is on our website, where our officers were being told that Jesus wants you to use your nukes. If you look at the PowerPoint, it has a picture of Jesus on a white horse quoting Revelation 19:11 as the mighty warrior. It quotes from the book of Hebrews, which is not from the Hebrew text, from the book of Timothy. It had a final endorsement from a highly decorated Nazi SS major, Werner von Braun, who of course used Jewish slave labor in his underground rocket factory, saying that he and his fellow Nazis at the end of the war only wanted to bring their great rocket technology to a Bible-based society. It was unbelievable. Unbelievable. We went to the Air Force. We told them to take it down. Of course, they wouldn't do it. We then went public. Many of our stories have gone viral. I think it was about 36 hours after we did that the Air Force stopped the training. They claimed that they admitted they'd been doing it for 20 years. It actually been going on for 25 years. That's an example. None of our clients, no one has ever touched a hair on the head of any of our clients. We are incredibly careful. We basically provide our clients AARP, not the one you're thinking about, but anonymity, action, results, and protection, if they want anonymity. Many of our clients do not want it. It's the last resort. What we will usually do, and we do it every day, sometimes every hour of every day, is to contact a commander or someone in the chain of command after we've verified what our client has told us. On 13 occasions, we have polygraphed our clients because we could not believe what we were hearing. And it's expensive to hire a polygrapher. We have never had one fail. The one that we thought was going to fail, who turned out to be off the scale truthful, was a Jewish rabbi in the army who was upset about the fact that during Yom HaShoah, the Holocaust Memorial Day at a large army installation, several fellow chaplains showed up in Nazi uniforms at a major army base. The moment he said that, I kept thinking, he's crazy. He was extremely upset about this, and he went back to the head chaplain and said, look, you're a rabbi, you're going to have to learn to get along with your fellow Christian chaplains. I'm sorry, they showed up, but they did not wear the Nazi uniforms. They threatened to. And the rabbi was horrified. A week later, they had some sort of a chaplain, there was some sort of a base get-together at the officers' club. And as the rabbi walked in for this, he looked on the walls, and hanging on the walls were Nazi uniforms. This was and he found out that the chaplains were smirking at him. They put them, because they couldn't wear it to his service because he stopped, they put the Nazi uniforms hanging from the walls in the officers' club. We couldn't believe it. We polygraphed him. He scored a 22. He was off the scale for truthfulness. Off the scale. We have had clients of ours told that, so many. We had a young private who was a Christian, but not a fundamentalist Christian, being tormented by his first sergeant when he arrived in Iraq. It was right before the Battle of Fallujah. He was told that until he could convince the first sergeant that he was born again, he would not be allowed to join his combat unit. You have to understand, these kids want to be in combat. They want to fight. He was told that he could either accept Christ to the satisfaction of the first sergeant, or he could fill up with a Dixie cup with pubic hairs from the latrine using tweezers, which would take 2 to 3 weeks. He refused to accept Christ in the way he was told, and started doing his odious task until he got to us. During the Battle of Fallujah, I'm sure you know, we had clients that came to us because we had Marines and soldiers that were handing out coins, John 3:16 coins. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whoever believes in him will not eternal life. You can imagine what this did. I mean, when we've been on the cover of everything from Harper's to Hustler. I had a long lunch with Larry Flint at the Four Seasons in Hollywood, and I think the cover story was Mikey Weinstein, Jesus and the Generals. I should have told my parents that the head story started on page 38, but you had to go through the first 37 pages to get there. So I'm not sure my parents are going to ever forgive me for that. But next question, anybody else? Yes, sir.
Just real briefly, you mentioned your website. What is your website?
Okay, it's just simple. It's military religious. We're the Military Religious Freedom Foundation. It's military religious freedom. The word foundation isn't there. I think the gentleman in the cowboy hat is on it right now. Military.
It's .org.
.org. MilitaryReligiousFreedom.org. We're a nonprofit. Any donations, of course, are tax deductible. But we don't need. People always say we want to write our representatives. Forget that. It's useless. It's useless, including our congressional staff in the state. Useless. They're not going to touch it. They're too afraid. There is not one of them. Of course, we have contact with some of the folks on the Hill, but they're afraid to do anything because we're too radioactive. I wrote a column for the Huffington Post. I have a regular column there and 3 or 4 other places on April 16th entitled Fundamentalist Christian Monsters. Papa's got a brand new bag. Thank you, James Brown. Just one second. And I called them what they are. Now, of course, the religious right like to say, look what Mikey says about all Christians, that whole circle, which, of course, is a lie. The problem is I'm a public figure, and if you're a public figure, it's hard to sue for defamation. It's much harder than if you are a non-public figure. It makes it much easier. Now, you had a follow-up question, Terry.
Yes, I did.
Can you yell it so they can all hear you, please, dear?
Yeah,
Okay. Go ahead.
I forgot.
Okay.
I'm a Navy submariner. I just came here for shore duty. I've been in town for about 3 weeks. And my experience with anti-Semitism has been very limited. I have seen little to none.
Can I ask what your commissioning source was?
I was ROTC at Tulane University.
Tulane? Okay, thanks.
And I like to attribute that to the fact that I think submariners are intelligent and, my question to you is there any particular part of the military branch or any branch of a branch that is particularly has a high concentration of these radical right?
What's your first name?
Travis.
Travis, thank you for that. First of all, I'd like to cut a hand for Travis for... He asked a great question. We've had many client situations on submarines, by the way, many of them, but very rarely from Jews, mostly from Protestants or Roman Catholics, in some cases Mormons. And I can talk more about that with you later. He asked a great question. We have found that Special Forces, the Navy SEALs, the Army Rangers, the Green Berets, the Air Force PJs, which train here, of course, at Kirtland, the closer you get to drawing blood, the closer you are to the point of the spear, the higher the concentration of dominionist fundamentalist Christianity. It's not that we don't see it on legal staffs or in the hospitals or with the base dentists, right? Or in the quartermaster corps. Of course we do. It's ubiquitous. It's the best way I can describe it, is that it's like gravity. It is, unless it's just fish in an aquarium, ladies and gentlemen, never see the water. That is just how bad it is. So we have found that the closer you get into a combat situation, the higher the concentration. That's one of the things that we've seen. It's a learning experience. It's really it's very daunting. I make 100 decisions a day. By the time I go to bed at night or in the wee hours of the morning, I realize I've made 30 mistakes. You turn off a lot of family and friends, people that you thought were there to support you, and it's hard. You're in the military, and you know that it is a brotherhood and a sisterhood, and the concept of being homogenous as opposed to being non is very important. It's supposed to be a team. But you see, the way we designed our country, Travis, as you well know, is that in this country, our founding constitutional framers looked at Europe, where most of the tyranny and oppression that had occurred, even when men of the cloth had been men in political power, they were the same thing. They looked at Cromwell in England, Miss Tom. They looked at the Salem witch trials here, and they said, we're not going to do that here. We're going to separate church and state, temporal and physical, rather spiritual and metaphysical, and we're not going to, and they did that in the First Amendment, which was passed in March of 1791. But of course, it doesn't say separation of church and state there. It doesn't actually say the words there. But as I tell the idiots that I'm constantly combating, and most of them won't even go on national TV with me anymore, is that, I asked him, if you're arrested for a crime, do you have the right to a speedy, public, and fair trial? And they go, yes, we do. He goes, we live in America. And I said, and yes, and where's that guaranteed? It's guaranteed in the Constitution. That's right there. And I go, well, actually, you're wrong. You know, you do get a public and speedy trial. You don't get a fair trial. That's not in the Constitution. That's through something we call case law. The same thing we have with separation of church and state, case law. And I'll ask them, you know, do you have the right to be searched at any point? And they said, no. We have our Miranda rights. I said, yes, that came about from a case called Miranda. I could give 3 million more examples. But the body of the Constitution was passed in December of 1789, which does include Clause 3, Article 6. I know we have some lawyers here. They probably don't know what's in there. Most people don't. It specifically says we will never have a religious test for any position in the federal government. And yet, in July of 2005, on the front page of the newspaper, most reviled and despised by the Pentagon, and what would that paper be, do you think? The New York Times, front page, so you know this had to be vetted. The then deputy chaplain for the Air Force, a 1-star general, who Bush went on to appoint to become the head 2-star general, announced a new policy that the Air Force would now reserve its right to evangelize anyone it determines to be unchurched. That, but they're going to hold a Geiger counter up to you? And if it comes back and says you're this undefined thing called unchurched, which I guess many of us would be in this room, why the Air Force is now reserving its right not to mainline or Protestantize or Roman Catholicize you, Judaize you, Islamize you, Hinduize you, Jediize you. They're going to evangelize you. That was just the start. Next question, please. I've got to give someone else the chance, but I'll come back.
Okay. What is your best estimate for this section of the circle that's outside? What are you talking about, 10%?
34%. 34% Dominions. That's our best shot. The chaplaincy is 84% evangelical, but remember the evangelicals are our friends. But about a third of that would be fundamentalists or dominionists. You got to remember that Hitler had 7.9% in his National Socialist movement. Stalin had 2.9% in his movement. So we're